Hi, my name's Bridget Kominek. I'm an English teacher here at Fullerton College, and today's workshop is all about editing. We're going to start off with an overview of the writing process. Editing is the last stage of the writing process, so I want to give you the 3 steps that come before so you can see how editing fits in. Then we're going to go over some editing tips that you can use on your own paper. You'll have some time to practice editing with the piece of writing that you have with you, and I'll give you some advice on where to go for extra help after you're done with this workshop if you need some more advice on your own papers. The first step of the writing process is pre-writing, the second step is drafting, the third step is revising, and the fourth is editing. If you see this quote from E.B. White, he's the author of Stuart Little and Charlotte's Web. He says, "A writer who waits for ideal conditions under which to work will die without putting a word on paper." Now it sounds a little dramatic, but he's right. If you wait for a lightning bolt of inspiration to strike before you start writing your papers for college or for anything, it's not going to happen. Inspiration is rare and it's fantastic when it happens, but you can't expect to wait for inspiration to get your work done. That's where the writing process comes in. The first stage of the writing process is pre-writing. Pre-writing is basically everything a writer does to gather ideas and make plans before writing something. There are a lot of different types of pre-writing that you might do. The first type of pre-writing is reading. You might be assigned something from a teacher, maybe something you've been reading in class, or maybe you're doing your own research. You might also discuss your ideas, maybe with a classmate in class or maybe outside of class, maybe with your teacher in office hours, perhaps with a tutor, or you might just have a casual conversation with friends or family members to give you ideas for writing. Another part of pre-writing is writing itself. You might list ideas, you might free write, you might do a cluster map. And then when you're pre-writing, you're also putting together an outline that you can follow as you draft. So pre-writing is all about gathering ideas and making a plan for the next stage, which is drafting. The next stage of the writing process is drafting. You take the best ideas from your pre-writing and you follow the outline that you created to write a rough draft. I have a really important tip here when it comes to editing. A lot of writers make the mistake of trying to edit as they go. They might type a sentence and delete it. Type a sentence and delete it. Maybe you've done this yourself where you spend 10, 15, 20 minutes just writing the same sentence over and over again. This is a surefire way to get writer's block. Instead of trying to edit as you draft, my suggestion is that you focus on drafting, just writing your ideas down, and then go back at the end of the writing process to edit. If you find a sentence that you're writing and you're like, this is horrible, I hate this sentence, it's full of grammar errors, just make a mental note that you will come back and fix it, but don't let that stop you. Instead, you can even turn off your computer screen or cover it up with a sheet or a blanket while you're writing so that you actually can't see what you're writing as you go. In drafting, it's really important to get your ideas down as quickly as you can, as much as you can, so that you have a lot to work with when you move on to the next stage of the writing process, which is revision. Revising is the third stage of the writing process, and this is where you reread your rough draft and get feedback from others like your teacher, classmates, or a tutor. Make changes to the ideas and organization of your essay at this point so that it says what you want it to say, and also that it fully addresses the assignment you're writing about. Basically, what writers do during revising is they add in, take out, and move around ideas in the rough draft. It's really helpful to get feedback at this stage, so you might come to the Writing Center and work with a tutor, you might share your draft with a classmate or your professor. It's really important, though, that you focus on the big picture ideas during revising. Don't worry again about grammar yet. That's what the last stage of the writing process is for. And that's what we're working on today. Today we're focusing on editing. After you're finished with your revision and you're satisfied that your essay says essentially what you want it to say, no, it's not going to be perfect. Of course, it's still a draft, right? So you want to spend some time making sure it says what you want it to say. But when you feel like you've dealt with all the parts of the assignment, when you've communicated your ideas clearly, your next step, your final step, is editing. And this is what we're going to be talking about the rest of our workshop today. Editing means finding and fixing sentence-level errors, like grammar errors, making changes to the words you use, and checking to be sure your citations are correct if you've used outside sources in your writing. This is really important because if your teacher has given you outside sources, whether it's something that you read in class or if you've done research on your own, it's extremely important that you make sure you cite your sources. Leaving those citations out could be committing an act of plagiarism. Even if it's unintentional, plagiarism is still a serious academic problem. So it's really important during the editing stage of the writing process that you review not just grammar errors, not just fixing those, but also making sure your citations are correct if you've used any outside research. Go ahead and take a moment to pause the video and pull up the Writing Center Workshop Editing Process handout. When you're ready to press play, we'll move on to some tips for editing. So now you're looking at your Writing Center Workshop editing process handout, and you can see there are several steps that you can go through as you're editing. Editing itself is more than just rereading your essay one last time before you hit print and turn it in. It's a very important process because if your sentences are clear and understandable and generally free of grammar errors, your ideas can shine through your writing. So this process is probably going to feel a little bit unusual. It's going to feel a little uncomfortable at first, but that means that it's working, because if you're doing something different, you're going to trick your brain into paying more attention. And that's the number one key when it comes to editing successfully. At this point in the writing process, your brain has read your essay several times. In fact, you could probably even memorize and repeat from memory sections of your paper. If you just read your essay again in the normal order you always do, your brain is going to just see what it thinks you wrote. It's not going to see what's actually on the page. Our brains are unfortunately kind of lazy. And what will happen is your brain will recognize what it's reading and it'll say, oh, I've read this before. I know what this is all about. And instead of paying close attention to what's on the sentence like you need it to for editing, your brain will kind of check out. Maybe you've noticed this when you've edited your own papers, because you've thought you've corrected all your errors, you get the paper back from your teacher, and all of a sudden there are tons of corrections, things that you're like, how did I not see that? Well, that's because your brain was on autopilot. So you need to do a few things to turn your brain off autopilot and get it focusing so you can find and fix the small grammar errors and the citations that happen when you're writing. So the first step of the editing process is going to ask you to pull out your paper. So whatever paper you're working on, I'd like you to pull it out and turn to the last page. I know this sounds weird. Go ahead and turn to that last page. You're also going to need a couple of blank pieces of paper. So go ahead and pause the video if you need to so you can find all of your materials, and when you're ready, press play. All right, so you've turned to the last page of your paper that you're working on. You've got your two blank pieces of paper. What you're going to do now is you're going to take one of those blank pieces of paper and you're going to cover up everything except for the last sentence on your paper. Now, the reason why we're starting from the end is you're going to try to trick your brain into thinking it's looking at something new. Like I mentioned before, if your brain is like, I've seen this before, I don't need to pay attention, you're not going to catch a lot of your grammar errors. If you start at the end, you're tricking your brain into thinking it's seeing something it hasn't seen before. Our brains love novelty, and when they come across something new, they are turned on. They're like, whoa, what's going to happen? I need to pay attention here. That's exactly what you want your brain to be doing while you're editing. Because it's very difficult to see tiny little errors like spelling errors or errors in punctuation, you want your brain to be on full alert. The reason why you cover up your page, you want your brain to only see one tiny piece of your paper at a time. Think about if you were feeding a toddler. You wouldn't give a toddler a cheeseburger and expect that toddler to be able to walk away and eat that cheeseburger. You need to cut it up into tiny bites so that the toddler can have each bite, eat it and not choke, and digest it the way you'd want them to. Same thing happens with your brain. You don't want them to choke. You don't want your brain to choke on all the information it has to deal with as you're editing. Instead, you want your brain to deal with each sentence bite by bite, slowly and steadily, so that you're going to be more likely to catch these errors. The next step on the editing process handout is to read your sentence out loud. This may also feel a little bit unusual and awkward, but it's fine. Find a quiet spot in your house, find a quiet corner of the library, read it quietly if you need to, but it's really important to read your writing out loud. If you just read it with your eyes, you're giving your brain one way of finding the errors. But if you read it with your eyes and you hear yourself say it, you're going to give your brain two ways of finding the errors. So you're just increasing your chances of finding the errors. And if we're being honest with ourselves, we all talk and discuss things with each other a lot more often than we read and write. So we're more likely to hear errors in speech than we are to hear them or see them on the page. So you're going to read your sentence out loud, and what I've got in front of me is a piece of writing that I've done for a class I was taking, a political science class, and I'm just going to read my last sentence. So as I'm reading, listen to this sentence and see if you can hear if anything's strange, unusual, or confusing. Partisan elections of judges is very similar to partisan elections of any politician judges. Politician judges run for office with the party affiliation clearly identified on the ballot. Now you can see I stumbled over that sentence, right? That's a great sign when you're reading your work out loud that there's something wrong with that sentence. And I know from my own personal experience that I have a couple of common types of grammar errors. I know whenever I write something, I'm going to have run-ons, I'm going to have comma splices, and I'm going to have spelling errors. I don't know why, that's just the way I am. So now that I've found a sentence that sounded kind of strange when I read it, and I know my own common types of errors, I can start looking for what's wrong. And that's exactly what you're going to do with your own writing. I found a spot in my paper between the two words politician and judges that I think sounds weird. And so as I'm looking at this, I'm realizing I actually do have a run-on. I have two complete sentences that are joined incorrectly. They don't have any punctuation in between them. So I know how to fix a run-on. I know I can put a period, I know I can put a semicolon, or I know I could put a comma with a coordinating conjunction, a word like and or but. I decided I'm going to put a period, make that change. Now I'm going to keep going. That was my last sentence. I'm going to move my papers up. I'm going to grab my second piece of blank paper so I can see my second to the last sentence. I can only see the second to the last sentence, and that's going to help my brain focus on this. Again, I'm going to read it out loud. I'm going to stop for a moment. I'm going to think about it. I'm going to consider if there are any problems or anything that needs to be worked on. I'm going to make changes if they need to be made, and I will make my way all the way up my paper slowly and steadily, step by step, sentence by sentence, until I reach the top. I'm going to give you some time right now to work on this with your own draft. Make sure you have your two blank pieces of paper. Don't use paper with writing on it, because if they're not blank, it totally defeats the purpose. Cover up everything sentence by sentence, and these are steps 1 through 6 on the top of your editing process handout. Now that you've had a chance to do some practice on your own paper, I have a few more tips for success that can help you make this process even more effective for you. Step number 1, know your own errors and look for one type of error at a time. It may sound tedious to read your essay 3 or 4 times before you turn in the final draft, but I promise you, if you look for just one type of error at a time, you'll be more likely to find errors than if you try to find all of your errors at once. And if you're looking for an effective strategy, this is it. Another tip for success is to make sure that you're thinking of this like a treasure hunt. I know it's kind of silly to think of editing as something fun, and it can be tedious. It's a difficult type of work to do. But if you think about it as a treasure hunt, you know there are errors in your paper. You know they're there. And the more you find and the more you fix, the higher that final grade is going to be. That's going to give you the incentive to move forward. So don't worry about making it perfect. You're probably never going to be able to find every error in your writing. This is the way writing works. But if you can find most of them, and if you can find most of the biggest problematic errors, you're going to increase your final grade significantly. So go in with the attitude that you know there are errors and that you're going to find them no matter what. Another good idea is to take some breaks. As you probably noticed earlier, when you're editing, it's very, very mentally draining. You're asking your brain to do one of the hardest things we ask our brain to do. Pay close attention to tiny details in black and white on a page. It's not easy to do. So take a break. What I recommend is every time you finish a paragraph, take 5 or 10 minutes. If you can, in those 5 or 10 minutes, do something physically active. Do jumping jacks, do sit-ups, watch a short video on YouTube that will make you laugh. Do anything you can to get oxygen into your brain. The more oxygen your brain has in it, the more awake you're going to be, and the more awake you are, the more errors you're going to find. I also suggest that you get help. Grammar is technical. So are citations, whether you're using MLA format in your English class or APA format in your psychology class. There are a lot of technical rules that take a long time to learn. Don't expect to be a grammar expert, and don't think you need to be a grammar expert to edit effectively. Instead, take advantage of the resources that are available. The Purdue University Online Writing Lab has a great resource. You have a few links on this handout for different ways to find and fix your errors, and suggestions on how to correct very common types of errors like run-ons and comma splices, as I mentioned earlier. The Writing Center here on campus also has tutors that can sit down with you for a half an hour one-on-one session, help you edit your own work, as well as lots of other things. Also talk to your professor. Especially if you keep getting the same kinds of grammar comments on your writing and you're not really understanding what those comments mean, having a conversation with your professor can be very helpful. As a teacher myself, I can tell you that sometimes I put comments in the margins. I know what they mean, but I don't know that my students do because I'm using my teacher speak. If you need help interpreting teacher speak, the best person to go to is your teacher. Also, if you have a writing textbook, Or if you have the Purdue University Online Writing Lab, pull it up actually as you're editing your paper. Have your book open, have your computer on, have your paper in front of you. Having all of your materials in front of you will make it much more likely that you will actually be able to make an educated correction, as opposed to just making a guess. I think I should put this comma here. See how it goes. Have your book in front of you. Look at the chapter on commas. Ask yourself, is there a reason why this comma needs to be here? Again, if you don't have your own textbook, the Purdue University Online Writing Lab is a great resource. As you're editing, just keep in mind that it is an important step of the writing process, but it is not the only important step. Don't forget that pre-writing, drafting, and revising are important precursors to editing, and that editing can be a time-consuming and challenging task. So following this process can help you use your time wisely, find more of your errors, and hopefully turn in a piece of writing that you're very satisfied with when the due date comes. Thank you.